Tell me what it says. Tell me what it says. Just tell me.
You already know what it says, Sandra.
David, please.
Neither of them. The test says neither of them is mine.
You don't understand. You don't understand. What happened to me?
Then explain it, right now. Because I have been standing in this hospital for 3 hours and I deserve an explanation. I can't.
Not here. Not like this.
Then I have nothing left to say to you.
David, don't walk away from me. Please. I am begging you.
My lawyer will be in touch by Monday.
Sandra did not tell anyone what happened to her the night of the 14th of March, 7 years before the twins were born. She had been coming home from a work event in Port Harcourt. A friend had dropped her 2 streets from her apartment because the road was blocked. It was not supposed to take long. It was not supposed to happen at all. But it did. And when it was over, Sandra picked herself up from the ground, walked the rest of the way home, locked her door, sat in the shower until the water ran cold, and made a decision that would cost her everything years later. She decided not to tell a single soul. She was 24 years old. She had just started a new job. She had a mother who would have collapsed from the grief, and a father who would have done something that landed him in prison. She had no energy for their pain on top of her own, so she buried it. She wrapped it in concrete and dropped it to the bottom of herself and told herself that silence was survival. For 3 years, it worked. Then she met David. David Eze was the kind of man who made you believe that good things were still possible. He was calm where she was anxious. He was steady where she had learned to expect chaos. He was a structural engineer working on a bridge in Enugu when they met at a mutual friend's wedding, and he spent the entire reception finding small reasons to come back to where she was sitting. By the end of the night, he had her number. By the end of the month, he had her attention. By the end of the year, he had her whole heart. Sandra told herself that what happened 7 years ago was over, that it belonged to another version of her, that she had healed enough, that David did not need to carry something that was already buried. She told herself this so many times that she almost believed it. They married in December, a beautiful ceremony in Calabar with 300 guests and a sunset that looked like something painted. Her mother cried through the entire vow exchange. Her father gave a toast that made the room go quiet with emotion. David held her hand through all of it and whispered that she was the best thing that had ever walked toward him. For 2 years, they tried for children. Month after month, Sandra watched hope arrive and then quietly leave. She went to the doctor. The doctor said she was fine. David went. David was fine. There was no medical reason. Sometimes it just takes time, the doctor said. Sometimes the body needs to find its moment. The moment came in the 3rd year. 2 lines on a test at 6 a.m. in the bathroom in Lekki. Sandra sitting on the edge of the tub with shaking hands. David standing in the doorway in his sleep clothes with eyes that filled so fast she thought he would fall over. He crossed the room in 2 steps and held her so tightly she felt his heartbeat against her own. When the scan confirmed twins, the whole family erupted. David's mother called every relative she had. Sandra's father drove 4 hours from Owerri just to sit in their living room and look at her daughter with proud eyes. There were prayers and celebrations and a baby shower that filled their compound with more people than Sandra had ever seen in one place. She should have been the happiest woman alive. She was terrified. Because somewhere beneath the joy, beneath the celebrations, beneath David's steady hand on her growing stomach every night, a question had begun to surface. A question she had spent 7 years refusing to ask herself. A question that now had 2 heartbeats attached to it and nowhere left to hide. She told herself it was anxiety. She told herself the timing made it impossible. She told herself that God would not be so cruel as to make that night follow her all the way here, into this home, into this marriage, into these 2 children that David was already naming and dreaming about and loving before they even arrived. She told herself everything except the truth. The twins were born on a Thursday morning, a boy and a girl. David wept openly in the delivery room. He caught both cords with hands that would not stop shaking. He sat beside Sandra's bed for the rest of the day, holding one baby in each arm with an expression that Sandra had no word for except complete. She watched him and felt 2 things at the same time. Love so deep it had no flaw, and fear so old it had no name. The children were 6 months old when David's uncle came to visit from Abuja. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes and old-fashioned opinions about things that were no longer his business. He sat across from David after dinner one evening while Sandra bathed the twins, and he said things that had no business being said. He talked about the boy's nose. He talked about the girl's complexion. He talked about a cousin who had been deceived by a woman once and how a man could never be too careful. He talked quietly and carefully, the way people do when they want to plant something and leave before it grows. David did not tell Sandra what his uncle said. He just grew quieter. He just started looking at the children differently. Not with less love exactly, but with a new uncertainty that Sandra could feel without being able to name it. She would catch him studying the boy's face sometimes with an expression she had never seen him before. She would ask if he was all right, and he would say yes, and the yes would land wrong every time. 2 weeks after the uncle's visit, David sat Sandra down at the kitchen table and told her he wanted a DNA test. Sandra felt the floor move beneath her. She asked him why. He said he just needed to be sure. He said it did not mean he doubted her. He said it was just something he needed for his own peace of mind. He said the words carefully, like he had practiced them, and Sandra sat across from him and looked at the man she had built her life around and understood that someone had already done the damage, that she was already on trial, that the verdict was being written before the evidence was even gathered. She agreed to the test because she believed in the timing, because she believed that 7 years was long enough, because she needed it to not be true as much as David needed to know. The results came back on a Tuesday. David called her to the hospital to receive them together. She thought that meant something. She thought it meant he wanted to face whatever it was as a team. She dressed carefully that morning. She held herself together in the car. She walked into that corridor beside him with her hands steady and her breathing controlled, and she told herself that whatever the paper said, they would handle it. Then she saw his face when he read it, and she knew. Neither child was his. The world did not end dramatically. It ended quietly. It ended with David's voice going flat and the paper folding once, and his footsteps moving away from her down that long fluorescent corridor, while she slid down the wall and felt 7 years of buried silence rise up through her chest all at once. He was gone by the time she found her legs again. The divorce papers arrived on Monday, as promised. Sandra did not fight them. She was not in a place to fight anything. She took the twins to her mother's house in Owerri, and she put the children to bed every night, and then she sat in the small back room that used to be hers as a child, and she allowed herself to feel everything she had refused to feel for 7 years. The grief of that night, the shame she had carried alone, the weight of a silence that had grown so heavy it had finally crushed the one good thing she had managed to build on top of it. She cried until she could not produce tears. Then she cried dry. Her mother knew something was wrong beyond what Sandra had told her. Mothers always know. She did not push, she simply made sure there was food and that the twins were bathed and that the light in Sandra's room stayed on at night because darkness was not what her daughter needed right now. It was her mother who eventually sat beside her one evening and said quietly, "Whatever happened to you, it was not your fault. Whatever you carried alone, you should not have carried it alone, but you are still here, and those children need you to still be here." Something shifted that night. Not all at once, not dramatically, but something moved in Sandra that had been locked for 7 years. She found a therapist in Enugu. She drove herself to the first appointment with the twins asleep in the back seat, and she sat across from a woman with kind eyes, and she opened her mouth. And for the first time since the 14th of March 7 years ago, she said out loud what had happened to her. It took 3 sessions before she could say it without stopping in the middle. It took 6 months before she could say it and feel something other than shame on the other side. While she healed, she worked. She had always been good with numbers. She had a degree in accounting that she had put aside to support David's career and their family life. She dusted it off. She started small, doing books for local businesses in Owerri, working from her mother's kitchen table after the twins went to bed. She was methodical and careful, and her clients sent her referrals because she was the kind of person who noticed things other people missed. Within 18 months, she had enough clients to rent a small office. Within 3 years, she had a staff of 4. Within 5 years, Sandra Eze, who had gone back to her maiden name, Sandra Okafor, was running one of the most respected small accounting firms in Enugu, with clients in Abuja and Lagos, and a reputation for the kind of quiet thoroughness that made businesses trust her completely. The twins grew. The boy had his mother's eyes and her stubbornness. The girl had her mother's laugh and her precision. Sandra raised them with honesty and boundaries, and a fierce tenderness that people who met her family always commented on. She had chosen not to pursue the biological father. She had made that decision clearly and with full information, and she did not revisit it. These were her children. They had always been her children. That was never the part that was in question. David heard about her success through mutual friends, the way people always hear about the lives they left. At first, he heard things in pieces, that she had started a business, that she was doing well, that she looked different, not sadder, which he might have expected, but stronger, which he had not. Then he heard the whole story. Not from Sandra. Sandra had never told it publicly, but her therapist had encouraged her to share her experience anonymously through a support organization for survivors in Enugu. And someone who knew David had read the account and recognized enough details to put it together, and the story reached him the way these things always eventually do. David Eze sat with that knowledge for 4 months before he called her. Sandra saw his name on her phone and felt nothing dramatic, just a kind of stillness. She answered. He asked if he could see her. He said he needed to talk to her. His voice had something in it she had not heard before. Not the controlled steadiness she had fallen in love with, but something cracked open and raw that told her he had been sitting with this for a long time. She said yes, not because she owed him anything, but because she had done enough healing to know that closed doors and open doors were both choices, and she wanted to make her choice from strength, not from fear. They met at a quiet restaurant in Enugu on a Wednesday afternoon. David looked like a man who had not been sleeping well for months. He had aged in the way that guilt ages people, not in lines exactly, but in weight, in the way he held himself, like something heavy was resting permanently on his shoulders, and he had stopped trying to put it down. He talked for a long time. He told her that he had not known, that his uncle had said things to him and something had broken open in him that he could not close again, and he had acted from fear instead of the love he actually had for her. He told her that when he found out what she had survived and what she had carried alone, he had felt something he could only describe as the worst kind of shame. Not the shame of being wrong, but the shame of having abandoned someone at the exact moment they needed to not be abandoned. He told her that he thought about the twins, that he thought about that first morning in the delivery room, that he thought about it all more than he wanted to admit. Sandra listened. She let him finish. Then she was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was even and clear. She told him that she understood why he had done what he did. She told him that she did not hate him. She told him that the years since he left had taught her things about herself that she might never have learned if he had stayed. Things about her own strength, her own voice, her own capacity to survive the unsurvivable. Then she told him the truth. She said, "David, the version of me that needed you to stay is not the version of me sitting across from you right now. She is gone." She went through something that would have broken most people, and she came out the other side and she built something real, and she raised 2 extraordinary children, and she learned to say out loud what happened to her without feeling like it would kill her. That woman doesn't need you to come back. She needed you 7 years ago when she was 24 on the floor of a shower with cold water running over her. She needed you 3 years ago in that hospital corridor. She needed you then, not now. She picked up her bag. She said, "I hope you find your peace, David. I genuinely do, but I have already found mine." She walked out of the restaurant into a warm Enugu afternoon. The kind of afternoon where the light comes down through the trees in long golden pieces, and the air smells like something beginning rather than something ending. She drove home. The twins were at her mother's. She picked them up and they argued over who sat where in the back seat. And the boy made a joke that was actually funny, and the girl rolled her eyes the way she always did. And Sandra drove through the evening streets of the city she had rebuilt her life in, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter and more permanent than happiness. Something that felt like arriving. Was it worth it to stay silent, or should Sandra have spoken sooner, even if it cost her everything? Drop your answer in the comments. We want to hear from you. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.